Bonjour everyone, in today's video I'll be showing you how to make this puffy raglan sleeve dress. I will be taking you through the pattern making process and then show you how to put it all together. So if you're interested, let's get into the video. I first start by copying my raglan sleeve pattern down. I did make a video showing you how to do this. If you have not yet seen it, I will have it linked to this video so you can check it out. And this sleeve, it will have a lining to it, so you can create a duplicate of this and have one for your lining and the actual sleeve where you will slash and spread it, or you can just use this after you cut out your lining. So I'm making some adjustment here because I want some ease to my sleeve. I lower my armhole by 1/2 inch and I add a 1/2 inch extension as well on each side. And so that's the adjustment that I'm making just so I can have more ease to my garment. So like I said, you can create a duplicate of this or you can use the same pattern piece after you cut out your lining. So here I am cutting out my lining, making sure I am marking all my notches. I will also be marking my dot point because I want to make sure I know where to sew up to when I'm sewing my dot. For the lining, I will be sewing the dot. For the main sleeve piece, I will not be doing the same thing. So I copy my dot point here on the inside of my lining. And next, I will be creating 3 sections on each side for the front and for the back of my pattern. I will be creating 3 sections and there's no specific measurements for this. You can have as many sections as you want. This is just so I can have some sort of guideline to slash and spread this. That's why I'm creating the different sections. And for my pattern here that you see, the dot space that is there, I will be using that. That's what I'll be using to create my gathers. For my sleeve, I will not be spreading the section at the neck area. I will only be spreading them at the hem area. I will be using the dot space instead to create my gathers in the neck area. And after cutting everything, I lay on a new piece of paper and I am putting my middle piece down and tipping it down. As you can see, I did not separate the middle piece because I do want the dot space. And as you see here, the neck part, everything is attached, but I'm spreading it at the hem. And you don't have to use a specific measurement, but I did use 4 inches in between each section. And you can tip your pieces down and make it easier for you that way. I don't know why I wanted to make things harder for me. But for my ending pieces, I did trace around them and I traced the corner, all the corners of them as well. For my back and for my front, all the far end pieces, I did so. I marked my notches and I am now doing the same thing for the front, making sure my neck pieces are connected and spread only at the hem. And I did 4 inches as well for that side. And so here I am tracing around my far end piece at the front, marking my notches and marking the corner as well that you're not able to see yet. But the corners are all marked because you want to connect them afterwards. And I remove my pieces once done and I am connecting it here. And I just freehanded everything, but you can use a curve ruler if you want to. And that means I freehanded my hemline as well. And then I added 3 inches to my hem all around. I added 3 inches. That's how much I extended my sleeve by. That is for the puffy sleeve. The reason why I did that is to create the balloon sleeve effect. Instead of using elastic, I wanted to have the balloon effect instead. And so that's why I make sure my main piece for the sleeve is longer than my lining. So I added the 3 inches just to make sure it is longer than my lining. You do whatever you feel like doing. Just make sure your lining piece is shorter than your main piece if you want a balloon sleeve effect. And so here I have my front and back bodice, and I am lowering my armhole by 1/2 inch and extending it by 1/2 inch, just like I did for the sleeve. And I am making that adjustment for the front and for the back. I will not be sewing in the dots, the waist dots, for the front though, I will be closing half of the dot and move it to the bust. I did that because I thought maybe by adding a bust dot, it would give me some shape at the front instead of it being flat because I already have a modest size bust. But it did not really do anything for me. It didn't do what I thought it would do. So that is optional. You do what you want to do, but I did add a bust dot to mine by closing half of my waist dot. I move it to the bust. And so once I have my dot open, my bust dot open, I mark the midpoint and then I connect the middle line to the bust point. And of course, we don't sew all the way to the bust point. So I mark 1 inch from the bust point and then I connect my dot legs to that point. And that completed my dot. And all I needed to do is finish it at the side and then just cut off all the excess. And that settled my bodice piece for my front. And that's all I'm using for my dress. I'm simply extending my fabric. So there's a dot here at the back, the center back, that is for where I will open my back up to fit my garment over my head. That's why I created a dot so I know where to sew up to. So I have all my pattern pieces here, and next I cut everything out. So instead of cutting everything to my waistline, I extended it to my hip instead, or roughly around my hip area. I did not have any specific measurements. This is a dress that I'm also freestyled, so you can do whatever works for you, whatever you prefer to do. But what helped me to get the same for the front and the back was by using my arm side line. So I measured from my arm side line down to 18.5 inches and then off. I cut across. And that's what I did for the front and the back. I used the arm side line because I thought it would be the same thing for the front and for the back. That would help me to get the same length for the front and the back. But you will see later on how that really turned out. But that's what I did. I used my arm side line. For the front, I really should have done it longer because I have the dot, but I did not take that into consideration when I was doing that. And so here I am marking my dot point for where it reached. I did put a pin there so I know where to mark, and that's what I did. And I also notched where the dot legs reached. I notched that on my fabric. So I'm just marking those same points that I created a notches at with my pin so I can connect it to the dot point and mark my dot on my fabric. And I wish I had ironed my fabric before I got started because it is very wrinkly and I am sorry about that. But once I marked all my dots on my fabric, I then went ahead and pinned it. And this is it after I pinned everything and it's ready to be sewn. But I also went ahead and prepared my back pieces as well for my center back and I pinned all the way up to my notch point at the back. Remember, I did mark a notch. And then my sleeve lining, I am also pinning that and getting that ready as well. And all that is in preparation for the puffy sleeve. So I did these pieces off camera and then I'll do the puffy sleeve on camera. So this is after I had sewn my dots for my linings, and now I have my pattern piece here for my puffy sleeve and just unpinning it. So I am going to show you how much we are going to gather the top to, and it's just to gather it to measure the same as the lining. And for the hem, the same thing. You're gonna gather the hem of your puffy sleeve so it measures the same as the hem on the lining for the width. And so this is just to show you the difference or after gathering one of the sleeve. So I went ahead and finished one of the sleeves off camera so I can show you what it should look like after we're done demoing. And one thing that's important also is to make sure the right sides are facing and you want to make sure you have the right piece connected because I did it wrong at first. After I finished an entire sleeve, I had to take everything out because I realized that I did it wrong. So you want to sew everything with right sides facing. So right sides of the puffy sleeve facing right sides of the lining. That's how you sew everything. Once it's sewn, then all the wrong sides will be facing each other after it's completed. And so I am connecting the hem lines together, pinning them together, and then I took them to my sewing machine and sewed them together. And I will say for this fabric, it would have benefited me to have a ballpoint needle instead of using a sharp needle because I ended up ripping through the fabric. This is not a fabric that could handle the sharp needle that I used because it ripped through every seam. Wherever I had a seam, there is a whole lot of ripping going on, which leads to me not being able to wear this outside, honestly, and maybe to the mail or to the car, but that's about it. And so here, after putting it all together, I am just top stitching, or maybe you would say understitch, and that is just to reinforce everything. This is a lightweight fabric, and there's a lot of gathers going on, and so that made me feel more secure. It made it seem more secure for me to do this, so that's why I'm doing so. doing a top stitch or understitch, whatever we would want to call it, but it does reinforce the stitches or keep the pieces together in a more secure way. So that's why I did that. And now I am just going to fold it right sides together um, to connect the side seams or the under seams together as so, just like this. And then I'm going to pin everything and then sew along that seam. And as you see, my lining, of course, is shorter than the puffy sleeve, and that is okay. The lining is supposed to be hidden, and this is just to get the balloon effect instead of me using an elastic. I prefer to do things that way instead. I think balloon sleeves are beautiful, and so I love making them. It's been a long time since I used elastic in my sleeves, but this is what everything looks like after sewing it. I flip it inside, I flip the lining inside, and that's what we end up with. And now I'm just pinning it all around, connecting the lining to the puffy sleeve before I go ahead and base stitch them together. And just like I did for the first sleeve that I showed you that was completed. And that's what everything is looking at. I also did stitch it at the neck side as well, all around. That's what everything is looking like. And that's both of my sleeves together, completely done, ready to be attached to my dress or to my bodice. And you can make this a top if you want to, but I wanted a dress, and that's what I did. And before I attach them to the dress, I am going to put the side seams. I'm going to sew the side seams of my dress together. And this is how everything worked out. My back ended up being longer than my front. I don't know how that happened. I understand that I did not do the dot, but that's more than the dot, so I'm not sure what was going on there. But I was not mad. I just cut it off. So now I am putting my sleeves in, and this is just like you would do a regular sleeve. That's how I went about it, at least. Before, in previous videos, I showed you different ways of connecting your raglan sleeves, but when it is a puffy sleeve where you actually have to do the sleeves first, then you connect them differently, just like I'm doing here. So I just use my notches to help me. I have my notches on the bodice, front notches to front notches of the sleeve, and back notches of the bodice to back notches of my sleeve. And that's why notches are so important. They help you to attach the right pieces where they are supposed to be attached. So I connected my both of my sleeves to my dress, pin everything around, and it's ready to be sewn. And I sewed all around except for the neck. Remember, the neck is the part that is gathered, and so that part I do not sew because that is part of my neckline. So I brought everything over to my sewing machine and just sew away. It took some maneuvering, and I don't even know how come because this was 3 layers of lightweight fabric that I was sewing over. So I don't know why it took so much maneuvering, but it got done. Everything got completed, and I did both of my sleeves, and that worked out. You know, the fact that it was lightweight, it made it easy for me to do my gathers. That was the plus for this fabric, at least. I was able to gather my fabric easily. And after I was done sewing, I removed my pins, and that's what everything is looking like on the wrong side, at least. Both of my sleeves are in, and I flipped everything, and that's what it's looking like on the right side. And I don't know if you could see all the rippings going on in my fabric because I did not use a ballpoint needle. I did not think that I would need a ballpoint needle for a woven fabric, but this fabric needed that. That's what I should have used for this fabric, and I did not. So that's why the damage. And that's what things are looking like in the back of my sleeves. And now I'm just getting ready to cut off the excess. I guess it would have been better to measure this from the side seam instead of using the arm side line. I know that my back bodice is longer because I do have a curved back, so I've made my back bodice longer. So I guess that's why that happened. If I used the side seam, it would have been different because the side seams match. But this is me creating a body strip for finishing my neckline. I used a body strip instead of facing. So I use 1 inch of bias strip. I created 1 inch of bias strip and cut it off of the bias of my fabric. And that's how I created my strip to finish my neckline. My bias strip is now done. And so now I'm going to prepare for my gather at the bottom of my dress. And I measured the front from the back. I divided them because that made it easier. So I cut out a piece of fabric that is 3 times the hem at the front and another piece that's 3 times the hem at the back. And the length is 12.5 inches. For my belt, I folded a strip of fabric and cut 3.5 inches along, and that is the width of the belt. I did cut my interfacing to place it on one side of the fold, and my belt honestly is too wide. I wish I had done 1.5 inches or 2 inches, but this is me preparing my neckline, and that includes the opening at the back. So I just folded the seam allowance at the back and sewed that, and that's what that's looking like after sewing it. And now I am going to attach my bias strip to the neck to complete my neck finishing. And I just pin my bias strip all around my neck. After pinning all my bias strip, I cut off the excess and took it to my sewing machine and sewed all around it. And that's what that's looking like after I did my sewing. And the next step, just like you would attach any bias strip, I will be folding it and then folding it over again. But I did end up removing some excess bulk around my neckline eventually. But I fold it and then fold it over again inside my garment and pin it and then take it to my sewing machine. Once everything is pinned all around, I take it to my sewing machine. And when it came to sewing it, for the finishing, I only sewed the parts that were not gathered. So all the parts of my sleeve, I did not sew it with a sewing machine. I hand sewed that. Meaning when I finish attaching my bias strip, I did not do the finishing to the sleeve part. I hand sewed that because I wanted to make sure it's only attached to the lining and not the exterior of my sleeve, not the exterior part of my sleeve. So for my bias strip, I finished with a sewing machine the parts that were not gathered for my neckline. The parts that are gathered, that's my sleeve part. I did that through with hand sewing because I wanted to make sure it's only attached to the lining, and that's exactly what I did. And here I'm just clipping around the curve part of my neckline because it helps me to fold it better because it's a curve, and that was just the best way to do it. When you do have a curve, you clip around it. This is after pinning everything around, and it's ready to be sewn now, at least the parts that are not gathered. This is after sewing that. I will be using a hooky knife for closure at the back. My dress hem, I folded it up twice because my fabric frays a lot, and I just figured that would have been the better way to go about things before I added the gathered piece. And so here I am preparing my piece to gather it. What I did is fold it in at 3/4 of an inch and then press it. And I then divided it in quarters, and here I was testing to see if maybe pleating it would have been better, but I ended up gathering it. So I did gather it in quarters because that made it easier for me to gather because it was just so much fabric to gather. This is what it looked like when I did the front. And I tried doing half of the back on camera, and that is how I did it. I did half and half, half of the back, half of the front, and then finish the other half. Did half of the back, then finish the other half. So I did it in quarters, you can say. But one of my thread strands broke off when I was doing this on camera, and that totally threw me off. I like to create gathers with 2 strands of thread, and so I was a bit nervous having to do all of this gathering with 1 strand, but it ended up working out fine. So everything was completed. So this is after gathering everything and pinned it all to my dress. That's what it's looking like, and it is ready to be sewn front and back, all done. I was happy when this was done because it was a lot. Then came time for another challenge, which was sewing everything together. It literally took me 10 minutes to actually sew this part. And what I did was making sure that my two lines of stitches, it was at least sitting on top of that fold that I created at my hem on the dress, the first part of the dress where I folded it over twice. I made sure that my two lines of stitches was over that. So it took some maneuvering and making sure I kept checking everything to get it to sew where I needed to be sewn. So yeah, I only did one line of stitches honestly to put everything together. And then I hem my dress, and hemming took some time because it was a lot of fabric to hem. So that was done, and this is my finished dress before I press it. That's what it's looking like, and this is what the interior is looking like with my hem, and where I connected the gather to my dress. That's what that's looking like, and that's my hook and I added to it and sewed that in, and that's my finished dress. And I already mentioned that I did some of the neck by hand sewing. That's what you just saw here. And that's my dress. Everything is done. I went ahead and ironed it. I completed my belt. And then I put the dress on and did some modeling. And that was it. Stay tuned.